everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Am I Doing This Wrong? You're here with the same gals, different coasts, new topic, ready to work. How are you doing, Morgan?
I'm good. I have a little bit of like a head cold. I don't know what's going on. Might be like travel exhaustion. We won't say the C word. It's not that. I took a test.
Yeah, she doesn't have a cunt. It's okay.
Yeah. I've been tested for that and it was negative. But otherwise I'm good. Work's been a little crazy and it's hot for the summer. Who'd have thunk, you know what I'm saying? But here we are. Just living. Trying to thrive, barely surviving.
Ooh.
Trying to make a rhyme.
Yeah, that's good. I got that.
Thank you. How about you? How are you?
I'm okay, a little bit overwhelmed, about to leave for my trip, trying to get everything planned and in order. And if you know anything about me, I'm not really about plan and order, but I'm trying to balance my wild nature to just like want to do all the things, but realize that I only have time to do like 2 things. So I need to do those 2 things well. So I'm trying to focus on that right now. So yeah, other than that, it is a week. We are moving through it. I was feeling a little groggy yesterday, but I do think it was just the jet lag. So I'm trying to, rise above,
Yeah. Just don't be sick.
Right. Exactly.
It's a mentality. Yeah.
It is. Don't accept that for myself,
Right.
Always strive for more.
So. Manifest. Health. Just health.
Mental wellness. Yeah. All the things.
Yeah.
Mindfulness. But anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving through the week, and yeah, I'm excited to get into some good conversation. I feel like our topic today is very relevant for both of us in our lives, and just to really get some good perspective and have good conversation,
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of mindful mental health wellness, what are we talking about?
Ooh, look at you with the segue. Today we are talking about creating healthy boundaries.
What's that? Just kidding.
No, seriously. No, really. But what is that?
Yeah.
Let's try and get into this and try to understand a little bit more. You know what I mean? I'm here to listen and learn.
That's good thing it's a podcast.
Right. Yeah. Right now I'm going to talk. So are you ready for this?
All right. I'm ready to listen. Go.
Yeah. So as always, just to let you all know, this topic it has a lot of different realms that I feel you could go into, but we are going to focus on creating the healthy boundaries and what that looks like, right? So first topic, what are boundaries? So I found an article on therapistaid.com, and it was titled Self-Boundaries, Info and Practice. So basically this site, just to kind of let you know a little bit about it, it's intended to be used by qualified professionals. Professionals who use the tools available on the website should not practice outside of their own areas of competency, and these tools are intended to supplement treatment and are not a replacement for appropriate training. So it kind of goes perfectly into our disclaimer, because as we always say, we are not experts, we are not doctors, we are not anything of the sort. We are just 2 gals trying to have a conversation and figure out something like boundaries. What are they?
Yeah.
So the definition that they give on this site is boundaries are the limits and rules that people set for themselves in relationships. Someone with healthy boundaries can say no when they want to, but they are also comfortable opening themselves up to intimacy and close relationships. So you really can't have healthy boundaries without being able to open yourself up and be vulnerable with people so that they can actually understand why those boundaries are yours and what that means to you, right? So I really like that part, because I thought about it for myself. Like, yeah, it can't just be like, no, sorry, I can't do that ever. It's like, well, what's the why behind it, right? And so we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. This is why Ryann always tells me when I say I don't trust people, she's like, Morgan, that can't just be like the end all be all. which is true. Tell me more.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like that's exactly why I thought it was so important that they included both sides, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like you have the boundaries, but then you also have to be vulnerable as well. So you need both to kind of work together.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I like this website as well because they include a worksheet to help teach clients how to set healthy boundaries by using effective language for speaking assertively, boundary setting tips, and practice exercises. So, as always, we will have all our show notes in the notes. We will have all of the websites, links, and articles in the show notes for this episode. So if you're interested in this worksheet, I did include it in the show notes because I thought it was really interesting. Some of the, different exercises that they have so that you can practice having and maintaining healthy boundaries.
Ooh, I
So,
really like that. Because once you realize you need a boundary, you're kind of like, okay, how do I go about that?
right.
I mean, we love to write things down, as we know.
And that actually comes up later. So very good.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
that little breadcrumb. It's great. So they also do mention on this website that it's important for this work of creating healthy boundaries to be supported by exploring your values and teaching assertive communication. So that term assertive communication comes up quite often, which I was like, there is a difference between assertive communication and just being passive aggressive and letting it like boil over to the point where you just like let it all out, right?
Right.
So I think that's something to keep in mind. Assertive communication is not passive aggressiveness. So let's get into the worksheet tips on creating healthy boundaries. A few things that I pulled out from the article that I thought was interesting. Number one is identifying your boundaries. So boundaries should be based on your values or the things that are important to you. For example, if you value spending time with family, set firm boundaries about working late. Okay, so that was the first one. Number two, your boundaries are yours and yours alone. Many of your boundaries might align with those who are close to you, but others will be unique. And number three, know your boundaries before entering a situation. This will make it less likely you'll do something you're not comfortable with. And so for me, this kind of was a callback to our mental checklist that came up during our one night stands episode because Morgan was giving me shit about like, what's a mental checklist? Like, why is that important? And when they mentioned this, I was like, this is exactly it, right? Like knowing those things before you go into something so that if, something arises that you're not comfortable with, you'll already have something in your back pocket to say like, hey, that's actually like not what I was intending to do tonight, or, however you want to phrase it, but it kind of gives you a little prep work before you get into situations so that you're not so caught off guard, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good example. And it's not just like one night stands, it could be any situation. Maybe you want to work late because you have a boundary with family.
You're completely right. And one of the examples that they actually gave in this worksheet was like one of the exercises that you could do was like, I'm not going to show up to any more family events if my weight is talked about again, like,
oh, yeah.
right. And to me, that was like super, super like on the head for me because it was just like, yeah, I feel like a lot of times I just have been taught so much to accept whatever comes at me or to brush it off, right? Like don't let it get to you, right? Like what is it? I was gonna say I'm sugar, you're glue, but what is it?
I'm rubber, you're glue.
There you go. Rubber, your glue,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not gonna stick to me, it's gonna bounce off of me, blah blah blah. But that's just like not the way things work, right?
No, not at all. But I think that's a really good example of assertive language versus being passive aggressive. Like
yes.
I'm really good at being passive aggressive, but I wouldn't know how to have assertive language. So I think that was a good one to bring up.
Yeah, good point. Yes, very true. And so, like I said, you can look into this worksheet yourself, but I really did appreciate how it provided example scenarios. Some were simple and some were a little bit more complex, but that kind of gives you time to come up with how you will respond. And so, like I said, we'll include it in the show notes and practice. Like I even looked over a few of them. I was like, oh, like how would I respond to that? Right. And they have like some template example responses of like what you could say. And for me, that was super helpful because sometimes I really don't know how to go about saying no or saying that I'm uncomfortable,
Right.
Yeah. So that was really cool. So that is, yeah, what are boundaries and how to identify them?
Okay.
And now talking a little bit more about why are they important, right? So now that we know what they are or what, example boundaries look like, why are they important? So I found another article from psychcentral.com, and basically how they described boundaries being important or having importance in your life is boundaries can help you retain a sense of identity and personal space, and they're easier to create and maintain than you might think. So you'll find boundaries in every kind of relationship, whether it be friends, family, and even brief acquaintances. You can't see them, but these lines help you stay you and provide a sense of mutual respect, protection, expectations, and support. So I just kind of want to elaborate on something that I liked. It said that boundaries are important even in brief acquaintances, right? Like,
Mhm.
I do think it's important to have boundaries, especially in the people that are going to be in your life for, the long haul, whether it be your real family, your chosen family, your partners, etc. But also too, like, I kind of feel like practicing boundaries with brief acquaintances kind of is an easier way to kind of like get into the habit of having boundaries with other people in your life, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like low stakes, like what's going to happen, like it's brief. So,
Right. That's true. I mean, we are now making a podcast about all of the details of our personal lives. So brief acquaintances may know more about us than some of our families. But on the flip side, I really liked how you said the part about maintaining a sense of self,
mhm,
because I absolutely have felt that way.
yeah.
I just feel like around certain people, I disappear.
Mm,
And I know that I do that because because there are boundaries that are needed
mhm.
in some of those relationships. And it took me a long time and a lot of therapy to realize that. And I'm still learning that. I'm for sure still learning that. But I thought that was a really interesting point to bring up.
No, same. I included that very intentionally because, as Morgan knows, like, sometimes being around family because it's, sometimes forced. And I told Morgan, like, I'm just gonna like put it out there, like I feel like a shell of myself sometimes around certain people. And that's very outside of my personality normally. Like normally I can pretty much be who I am around anyone. Like I don't really mind that. And I'm okay with, whether it makes people uncomfortable or whatever. Like that's just kind of who I am. And so like reading this was a little bit tough for me because I realized like how much I do lose myself in those moments, and it makes me rethink everything that I do. It makes me think twice about every action that I'm going to have, every comment that I say. Like I end up just being really quiet, and that is just completely opposite. And I don't think I would have been able to notice that about myself unless it were for therapy. I think a lot
Yeah.
of times when people are quiet, especially myself, I used to think of it as like, oh, I'm just an observer. I'm just like sitting back. Like I just don't want to get involved. When in reality, like I couldn't get involved because I didn't know how, because I didn't feel comfortable getting involved. And
Right.
so this was really important for me because yeah, like losing yourself in those moments, it's hard to figure out, is that just a response to this or is this like a bigger issue? So yeah, I agree. I
I
included
think
that.
it's probably both,
Mm,
right? It is a response
yeah.
because it's probably something you did, you know, as a reaction to situations when you were younger, when you didn't have much authority, when you were still figuring out your sense of self.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's all those behaviors that we're trying to unlearn as adults, right? It's why
Yeah.
we're in therapy. So, you know what I mean? I think it's all of it.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Very well said. So just continuing, um, it does mention boundaries are important in all areas of life, but they come up most in romantic partnerships. So lines can blur with romantic partners, especially during the early days where excitement and aiming to please levels are high. Now, I thought this was really interesting because, yes, that's true. Like honeymoon phase, you just want to please each other, like exciting. But the aiming to please has always been so much more prevalent in my professional life and in my familial life, right? Like, I feel like if anything, the one area of my life that I could be totally myself has always been in romantic partnerships.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I get what you're saying because I think we have very similar situations. As I've said before, though, I haven't had that many romantic partners. Like a lot of my love life has been me wilding and just doing the most and, hooking up and doing, having fun. No regrets.
Right.
But yes, I get what you're saying, and I think the place that I have been most comfortable is in my friendships, my chosen family.
Yeah.
Because I sought out those relationships where I didn't have to feel that pressure.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean there weren't boundaries in other ways or that we needed boundaries in other ways, but it was never the same feeling that I got with other relationships I had in my life already.
Yeah, very good point. Yes, same. All right. So I have a question for you. Has your therapist asked you about or suggested that you set boundaries? Has that come up?
Yeah, yes. But not so directly. I think it was more me figuring out the reason behind some behaviors and then, where does that stem from? And then we can kind of come up with a game plan on how to handle that kind of situation. Does this upcoming event bring you anxiety? Who's going to be there? Why is that the case? And then, taking it a step further, I actually, my psychiatrist recommended this app to like track. It's kind of to track moods. But it's also to kind of just see what you're doing in your day to day and like what different events are bringing you anxiety, bringing your mood down, different things like that. And I thought that was really interesting. If anyone cares to know, it's called Daylio. So I'm going to download that.
How do you spell that?
Daylio.
Daylio. Daylio.
Right.
Okay.
So if you can say like, okay, I have a work meeting twice a week, and then you realize like, okay, how was your mood before or after that meeting? And that's just one example. Let's say you're going to a family event, like a holiday's coming up. Okay, how are you feeling about that? So I really liked that. I, with going to therapy and doing, work on my mental health, I was like, how do I track this? Like, what am I looking for? So I really liked that recommendation and I will be trying it out. But I thought that was a good way of kind of just seeing what things bring you, like I said, anxiety, anxiousness, like make you nervous, make you feel overwhelmed. Like I just want something tangible that I can look at so I can say, okay, no more Easter for me with family or something like that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Interesting.
See where that goes.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Like we say, writing it down, but we'll get to that.
Ooh, okay.
So just to end off this topic, while there are some basic rules to consider when building and maintaining healthy boundaries, what works for one person might not be so ideal for someone else. So let's get into creating those healthy boundaries. All right. Now, I did want to start with family boundaries first, but again, this can apply to pretty much anything. Okay. And so I found this article on npr.org, and it was by two authors, Julia Furlan and Claire Marie Schneider. And it's called How to Set and it's called How to Set Boundaries with Family and Stick to Them, which I really like. Easy to start the boundary.
Right. Easier said than done. That's for sure.
Yes. So let's get into it. So whether the boundary is saying, sorry, I can't attend to this gathering indoors because of COVID, or cutting ties with a family member, boundaries can look as different as the families they are a part of. And setting and maintaining them can be really tricky. So I like that they just set this article up like, hey, we know that this is going to be a fucking feat for you, but like,
Yeah.
let's just try and work this out, in a manageable way. Let's
Right.
call it that. So 2 experts that they interviewed in the article and asked basically like their expert opinion were one of them was a writer and wellness consultant, Alex L., and another one is a therapist and author, Andrea Benoit. And Benoit. And basically they share their best techniques for making and maintaining boundaries.
Okay.
So the first thing that they start with is get clear with yourself and ask yourself, what do I need? And so they basically, elaborate on being completely honest with yourself, which is a process in itself. You have to actually know what you want, not what you think others want, not what you think others expect you to want, like what in your life is actually a want and a need for you yourself, not thinking of anybody else, right? And so it goes on to say, if you didn't have models of healthy boundaries early in life, as we just talked about, it may be difficult to identify your own wants and needs. So this completely makes sense, right? Like if you have not seen that modeled, you're literally Googling it just like all of us and trying to figure out what the fuck is a healthy boundary and how do I
Everyone's downloading the worksheet right now, including me, because I'm like, I don't know what I want. Like this has been such a struggle in my life. Like I finally hit a point in my 30s now that I'm like, oh, here are a couple things that I really like. But like, damn, wow, ouch. This is like nail on the head.
Right?
Great. Great.
Great. Yeah, no, exactly. I thought this article was just like, yep, this is what we need.
Right.
So the second thing they talk about is lean in. You can be your own inner expert. You have the power to do that. Prioritizing your own needs and wants is an important step to inform the boundaries you create. What have we been saying? You have to not only like figure out what you want and need, but you have to like own that and be like, no, this is actually what I want to perpetuate throughout my life with all of my, relationships. Of course, you can have different boundaries with different people, depending on your relationship for sure. But you have to actually still own that. Like, I kind of think of it as like, what boundaries or, like what boundaries for me will help me maintain my sense of self throughout the entire year, right? Like throughout all of the different scenarios that I'll be in, like what are the type of boundaries that I really have to set for myself and other people so that I feel like I can maintain a healthy sense of self. Like that's the biggest thing for me, like realizing, coming to that aha moment that I want to be myself all the time, right? Like I don't want to like put on different hats. Don't get me wrong, like obviously like culture plays a part and like, different scenarios are fine, but as far as like me being my authentic self, like I want to maintain that, right? Like I want to continue that. And so, yeah, this one was a big one for me because it was just like, oh, right, like I have to figure it out for myself.
I think the first one really helps you get to the second one, right? If you don't know who you are or what you want, like it says, then how can you maintain that?
Exactly.
So, I mean, these go together, but they do make sense.
Right.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if you aren't sure of what you want and it's like changing by the day, so are your boundaries, right? Like, because you're going to be all over the place, which is how I felt in a lot of situations, actually. So, whew.
Right, it's true. And then other people might not see those as strict boundaries, right?
Yep.
So if someone wants to take advantage of that, they might be able to because you have now backtracked on what you had said. Which you're allowed to change your mind. I don't mean it like that. Live your life and do what you want to do, even if you want to do something new every day. But if you are creating boundaries with certain people, then I think at least know what you want out of that relationship or out of that event or that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said.
So now that you know that you want to maintain like your sense of self, did your therapist help you get to that? Do you feel like therapy played a part in creating those boundaries or helping you set boundaries? Is that something you guys explored in therapy?
Like you said, I think it was the same very indirectly, but then like my last few sessions, it was very direct. Like I think my therapist realized that like like I said, at the beginning, she was like, I'm not getting perfectionist from you. And I'm like, nope, not at all. Like you can scratch that off your list. Like that's not me. But I think in that she realized like, oh, you're not going to be striving for more because you don't really know what that looks like for yourself. Like I was happy with any progress. And I told her that like, wow, thank you. Like you've opened my eyes to so much. But I think she realized as I got more comfortable with her and as I started really telling her like what was happening in my life and what was happening with the people in my life, she was realizing like, oh, okay. So we started with a no journal, which is exactly what it sounds like. She was like, I want you to, for even a day or a week, however long you can do it, just for a day, whatever, write down how many times you say no to things, and she was like, just write it down, just see. And I was like, okay. And then like, I thought about it and I was like, oh shit, like, I don't feel like I ever say no. Like I'm constantly saying, sure. Yeah. Yep. Can do it. And then being like, oh, fuck, I can't do like any of those things, and then like, oh, sorry. And having to clean it up later because again, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not thinking about the end product. I'm just like, yep, let's go do it. Great. And so, but also not just me trying to people please, which is a part of it, but also too, like, I'm not saying no because I don't think it's necessary. Like, I don't think, I think I'm like, just like, grabbing up every opportunity I can and like, making all these great decisions, but it's like not though. It's really detrimental to my mental health. And so I started the no journal. And then after that, as I told her, I was like, yeah, I only said no like twice this month. I don't know. And, and so then she did say like, but then she did say explicitly, like the boundaries that you set up and create for yourself are for you and you only, and you do not have to justify those boundaries. And I think justifying it to myself is something that this article is talking about, but always feeling like I need to put a caveat with other people, like, no, because X, like, no, because I think that there are some people in my life that don't listen to what I say. And if I am going to be successful in those relationships, if I actually want them to be in my life in the future, the caveats have to stop because it just gives people a way to take advantage of you. And that's basically what was happening. And that was basically one of the biggest reasons that I was having so many issues like communicating effectively, because it was bleeding out into everything else that I did. So yeah. Ooh. So we definitely talked about it. And I'm sure we will continue.
Right. Yeah. It's a work in progress.
As always.
As is life.
Right. And then after you have, identified what you want, you've leaned in, write it down like we've been saying. And so an exercise called the boundary circle is just that. Draw a circle on a page. Inside the circle, write down the things you need in order to be seen, supported, and heard, and leave anything that distracts from that outside the circle. I know it sounds silly, but it's a really good exercise, and be willing to be flexible and silly with yourself. So, as a reminder, boundaries can shift and change with you. When you create a boundary, you are drawing clear lines for the behavior you'll tolerate.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
You guys let us know if you want some kind of mental health journal, boundary journal, maybe. We already talked about the sex journal, TM, but we love a good journal. So maybe this could be another venture.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This was really interesting.
We could have a whole series.
We really could. I mean, seriously, right? Like it's an ever-changing thing, and I think more people need to understand boundaries so that they understand why they're important to other people. You know what I mean? Like until you internalize it, it's not going to work on the external. And so that's what I'm working on doing right now. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. And so this article goes on to basically just give more understanding about boundaries, it says you decide what your boundaries are so they can be flexible. Boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships and sometimes for healthier relationships with ourselves. Everyone isn't going to be able to journey with us forever. And actually, that can be our biggest blessing. So let's get clear about who we need by our side and maybe who we don't need right now.
Ooh. Bam.
Let
All
that
right.
settle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really sink in.
Right? I mean, I have said this to Morgan before. I mean, we were probably talking about something, completely different, but I have said that like everyone does not need a front row to your life. Like everyone does not need a front row seat to your life, to your choices, to your opinions, to your feelings. Like the more that you can protect that is like the more that you can, protect your sanity. And that's why, when Morgan says, like she doesn't trust people, it's not that I don't understand where she's coming from because
But you, to that point, you tell me like, no, Morgan, you have to open up. But that's because our relationship, well, it hasn't had a lot of boundaries for a long time, but but that's why we both got, codependence. But that's why we both have therapists now. We got to a stage in our life where we can't be everything to each other, right? I mean, we can in some ways, but not everything. Like my journey is my own, and same to you. And so, but I mean, at least that shows I'm being vulnerable somewhere. But I am protecting myself in a lot of other places, and probably to my detriment in some cases. But I will leave that up to my therapist to help me figure out.
You know what? Fair enough. All right. So when you're thinking of making a life-changing boundary, get comfortable and think through the things that might happen as a result. So one of the quotes they use is, am I willing to actually stop speaking to this person after multiple warnings when they have broken my boundaries? Am I willing to take the steps that I need to keep me and my family safe? Whew. So big questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's so tough. That's so tough.
I know.
But and yet it's just like the cycle of like toxicity. Right? And I think it can be even harder if you're maybe someone who's trying to do the work, who is maybe surrounded by people who aren't.
Yeah.
I have come across that quite a bit, and I recognize it. I can see people for their own issues, but we've said this before, people can only meet you as far as they're willing to meet themselves.
Yes.
So what do? It's up to you to make a choice at that point, because you know that you are giving more than you are getting. And so you need to decide what you deserve.
Yes. Snaps. Which honestly is a perfect segue into my next question. Do you think you've been able to create healthy boundaries in your life?
I think I have. I think there are still places that could use some work. But I think I see them for what they are now. Like I don't bear as much resentment in certain relationships in my life, which was very hard because I have a lot of resentment in my life. But I think the first step is just being aware.
Right.
And I think I keep a distance from certain relationships in my life to avoid having to end contact completely. So it's probably like like walking on like thin ice. So we will see. We will see, but yes, I think I have successfully created healthy boundaries. I think there are more to create, or on the flip side, there are relationships that may not be long term. So, how about you?
So, I've got some work to do creating those boundaries for sure. I don't really know if I can say I've successfully created boundaries. I think I'm starting to. Um, yeah, I'm starting to for sure. I think with how tumultuous like my past relationship was, and then I basically took like 7 years to be single. I mean, partially my choice, but like also like, slim pickings kind of thing. But it was for the best, I did take time to figure out what I wanted. And in my current relationship, those boundaries look a lot different and they're for the best, we definitely test each other's boundaries, but they're there and we know that they're there. And so that helps a lot. So yes, I'm working on them, but I have a long way to go. And what you said, it is hard to think that some people won't be in your life or
Yeah.
won't be in your life the same way.
Yeah.
But as I grow, like through therapy and just like, by trying to like better myself, I realized that like there's no reason to hang on to that anyway, because why would I want a resentful relationship rather than just like a distant one? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think I can think of some healthy boundaries you have created. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. You might be thinking in one capacity, but I would say I think in your professional life, you have created some very healthy boundaries. You definitely know when to stand up for yourself, know when to call it,
mm.
especially in this past year. I feel like I've seen you do a lot of things that are really impressive. So don't sell yourself so short.
You know what? You're actually really right. I wasn't thinking about that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it has taught me how much or how differently people will respond when you do give them like, hey, this is it for me. And like, do with it what you will, because I'm done, right? Like this is what I'll do. And
Right.
that's really true. Like it said, that other piece of it is being very vulnerable. And I have taken that route instead of like keeping it inside and getting angry later. Like I've gone the
Yeah.
vulnerable route multiple times in my professional life. And it has paid off every time, really. Like every time, because whether or not that person is happy with the response, I mean, that's on them. But as far as for my mental health, like that's a really good point. So yeah, like pat on the
Right.
back for me.
Same. I literally did something like that today at work. So pat on the back for me too, because I'm not one to ask for help. I will, die on that hill before I have to rely on anyone. But I was very stressed out, very overwhelmed. And so I called my boss and I was just like, hey, I'm really all over the place right now. Can we take a few minutes and like, can you help me get organized? Like, can we just check in on what I'm doing? And can you just let me know if you think things are a total shit show or, am I just over stressing?
Mm.
And, it really helped me feel like I was getting back on track. So I think that's true too. I
Yeah.
think healthy boundaries, yes, but also the vulnerable side is a really good thing to point out too. And doesn't mean you're weak or incapable. Everyone needs a little bit of help sometimes.
Yes. Oh my gosh, we're growing.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yes, I was actually yes, I was gonna tell you, or I was gonna bring that up earlier about what you did today, because that was a really big deal. Like I was like,
Mm,
wow, that's super awesome to hear, because
yeah.
yeah, a few years ago you definitely wouldn't have done that,
No.
So growth. Hashtag growth.
Yes.
All right, so now that we've covered what healthy boundaries look like, I also just wanted to balance it out a little bit and get into the chaos of it all. You know what I mean? Um, so now let's talk about boundaries that don't work. Okay, so this is going
Mm,
back to that psychcentral.com article. And I really like this because you do need to know what is the unhealthy side of boundaries look like, right? Like what does it mean if you're taking it too far, or if you just have things that you might think are boundaries but are actually just like toxic behaviors, okay? So a few that they list are, one of the first ones is anything that limits a person's options is unhealthy. And so this is basically meaning like another person in this relationship, whether it be, familial, profession, romantic or otherwise, any boundary that limits a person,
mm,
anything that limits a person's options is unhealthy. So that's the first one. So to elaborate a little bit on that, limiting a person's options, such as around time, and the way they spend it, the way they act, and even the way they dress. So boundaries shouldn't be implemented to try and change a partner. And they even go on to say it's not about trying to manipulate the negative stuff. Accept them for who they are. If they're not right and you're not compatible, set them free to meet someone else.
Boom.
Boom.
Yeah, boom. Mic drop. But I mean, yeah, this was just like so reminiscent of our dating red flags episode.
Yeah.
Like, because those aren't boundaries. That is manipulation. That is control. That's not the same thing.
Right.
Boundaries are for you and like your wellness, your mental health. Those are not like putting those on someone else is the opposite of what creating a healthy boundary is.
Exactly that. And they even talk about red flags as well. Like they go on to link
really?
their article about red flags. So exactly, right on the head. Okay. So they also just give a few tips on how to avoid toxic relationships and lack of boundaries. So if you feel like you can, relate to any of those unhealthy boundaries or just ways and behaviors that you might use yourself, which is actually not about creating boundaries. It's more about, like we said, manipulation and control. Here's a few tips on how to avoid that. So, number 1, begin early. Introduce boundaries early on in the relationship before habits have formed between you and the other person. So that's why I kind of said at the beginning, like, I think that creating boundaries with brief acquaintances or like people that are new in your life are a good like practice run to see how to kind of go about that and maybe like apply it to other parts of your life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. But it also kind of, I just kind of got like that creeping fear of like, what do you do about the people who have always been in your life? What do you do about the long-term relationships that are already there?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Ooh, I know. Yeah,
Tell
you
us.
cringe. Tell us. I know. I have all the answers. No.
Yeah.
Well, the other two that I do, or the other few, I feel like these are a little bit more effective for if you don't begin early, right? But
Got it. Okay.
obviously, yeah, proactive versus reactive. Proactive is always going to be the best choice. But if you can't, number 2, conversation is key. Even if it's awkward, you need to discuss your feelings, even about sex. So they point out sex because obviously they're talking mostly about romantic relationships, but even if it's awkward, right? Discussing your feelings, like your feelings cannot be decided by anybody else other than yourself. And that is that's a double-edged sword, right? Like it can mean, or I'm sorry, no, that works both ways. Like your feelings are yours and yours only, and you can tell people about the way things make you feel, but you cannot expect that to mean as much to other people as it does to you. Like you have to be ready to like say it, but also like get whatever they have to give back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's super important. Yeah.
I mean, it is, but yes, I mean, I think that's where we're circling back to like that vulnerability, but also being assertive, right?
Yeah.
You're putting things out there that you might not get the best response to all the time.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared for that as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
And even in the language I just used, we'll talk about that in a second. But number 3 is it's okay to ask for space, me time away from a partner or person. Talk about why you need it and why it's meaningful to you. So recognize how the other person may feel and work with them through that. So it's a give and take, right? Like relationships take 2 people and or more, whatever. But you have to recognize that what you say, like what you are setting up for yourself, might have a negative or positive effect on that other person. And so you have to be willing to work both ways, right? It can't just be like I need this and like deal with it. It's like, well, I need this. How does that make you feel? Like what can we do to figure out maybe boundaries for that other person as well, right?
Right. And I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying about you don't always need a reason why. I think it depends on the relationship. It depends on how close you are with that person. In regards to a romantic partner, like you don't want to make them feel shut out of your life, or you don't want to make them maybe feel like suspicious of something or, something like that. So I think if you, depending on which way you care about that person, then an explanation might just be looking like look at that as more of a way of helping them understand your needs
Mm.
versus like, just like, I said no and that's it because I want to go on this road trip by myself for a week. Like, what? Okay. Bye.
Right.
I don't know. Like,
bye. Right. No, exactly. Very good point. Yeah. Be ready to receive as well, right? As much as you're giving. So yeah, for sure.
No jokes about being ready to receive. Always be ready to receive.
Always, always be ready to receive. She's always ready. Anyway. But yeah, like I just said, I mentioned the language that I use. So like, you make me do this, or you make me feel blah, 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 right? Number 4, use I statements. Examples of I statements done the right way are, I felt really blank when this happened. I feel really blank when you do whatever action or say whatever. And number 3, I feel like blank, right? So all starting with centering around you and your emotions and your feelings toward, said situation. I statements done incorrectly are, I know that you blank, right? Like, I know that you do this, and da, da, da. Or number 2, you made me blank, right? That's saying, giving that ownership to the other person as if they control your emotions or, your actions. And number 3, you always blank to me or at me, right? And so any of those are just taking all responsibility and even really taking your emotions out of your hands, right? You're taking all of the
Right.
ownership and responsibility out of your hands, which really just allows the other person to do what they will with everything in that situation. And so you have to be vulnerable enough to recognize that you are still in control of your own emotions, even though that's scary to think. And it doesn't always mean that you're going to have perfect control of them. It just means that you do have to recognize that you can only own up to what you have done and how that has affected other people. But, just as much as you want to share with other people, you have to be ready to accept the fact that you may have done things wrong in that situation as well.
Who, me?
Yeah.
You're talking to them over there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true though. I mean, we're all a little toxic, right? Like, people have probably put up boundaries with us. That's just life. So it's not, get too high up on our horses here. But I
Right.
think acknowledging that if someone's having this conversation with you and you're feeling defensive, then maybe taking that step back and being like, okay, I might not feel like I'm making you feel that way, but I don't determine how you are feeling. You have feelings based on the situation that I am a part of.
Right.
So, damn, some hard realities in there.
I know. It's real up in this. All right.
Just ready to receive. Up in this.
With arms wide open.
Oh, don't sing Creed.
I will spare you all. Only this time.
Yeah.
I'm getting more and more comfortable on the podcast, so we'll see.
We're gonna get slammed with like a what is it?
A cease and desist.
Yeah. No, like, well, is it a cease and desist?
Or like a copyright?
Copyright? Yeah, copyright.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of the above, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, whatever I can say to get you to not sing Creed. So yeah.
Not much,
the lawyer.
honestly.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan, that brings us to the final question. Are we doing this wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I've created what I thought were healthy boundaries and they weren't. I think I'm just still learning how to create healthy boundaries.
Right. Yeah.
And it's hard, right? Like, every relationship is different. Things are going to happen in your lives, in the people around you's lives. Like, I think that's really hard. And we're all still growing as people, right? So even though we want to be so steadfast in who we are, like, things do change. We do make different choices.
Yeah.
So I do like the idea of making that chart though. I know it seems kind of simplistic,
Mm-hmm.
but if there are certain things that bother you and you know that they just piss you off every time, like put it in the circle. Be like,
Mm-hmm.
or outside the circle,
Outside the
whatever.
circle.
Yeah, outside the
Yeah.
circle. Yes, I'm already doing it wrong. I like that.
Yeah.
I think even if it's two things on the inside and two on the outside, at least you know.
Right.
At least you
Exactly.
have like something to look at that might make you feel better the next time you go to like the holidays with your family or a meeting with coworkers that drive you insane or or you're dating and you're like I don't know, I really want to meet someone, so I'm just gonna try and be okay with a lot of things that I'm probably not okay with. Like I
Yeah.
think it really is applicable in a lot of ways and it's pretty easy to do.
Right.
Yeah.
We could honestly have this be a series, like creating healthy boundaries in so many different things, right?
Right.
Like I was thinking about that too. There's so many examples of creating healthy boundaries in the workplace that I am still learning now, like working back in an office, working around
Yeah.
other people, like I don't come into contact with people as much, but when I do, like when I'm out, working community assignments and stuff like that, like there are definitely boundaries that I could set that would really just set me up for success. And just letting people know, like, hey, this is what I expect. If you have anything that you expect from me, please let me know. That's a
Right.
great way to practice boundaries. But I definitely think that, yeah, like you said, I don't even know if I've been doing it wrong because I don't even know if I've been doing it. Like there are so many situations where I know that I felt so uncomfortable, so out of sorts, outside of myself that I just let pass by me. Like I said, passive aggressiveness, and it would come out in other ways. I mean, it has to, right? Like there's no
Yeah.
getting rid of it. There's no brushing it off of your shoulder. Things hurt, words hurt. I am not immune to it. I feel very deeply, and that does affect the people around me, which is what I am trying to work on. And so as I am trying to set up those boundaries, I have to be comfortable with the fact that like everything does not need to be over explained. Like a part of boundaries is, the biggest part is that they are for you, and I cannot expect everyone else to accept that as such. But I do get to choose who is around for it, and
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, like taking responsibility for that is scary as fuck. Like I have to actually decide, like, how hard that is for me, Libra over here.
Libra.
Libra, stand up or sit down because I can't
Yeah.
choose. But but
Oh my god.
yeah, it is totally applicable, and I am going to try some of these. I mean, I started a habit list when Morgan was here from one of our past episodes, like I really am trying to create ways to figure out what works best for me, and in turn that will work best for the people that I care most about. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we're here. That's what this podcast is for. Kind of.
kind of.
Or
Well,
just to not feel so alone.
all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, everyone take a deep breath. We've talked about a lot of big things, we've had a lot of big feelings, but I really just want you all to know that like this is yes, one of the reasons we created the podcast was definitely to feel less alone, create that sense of community outside of maybe your everyday community that's a given, right? Your family, your coworkers, right? Like people that you've grown up with. Like we really wanted to create a space that people could come and get some perspective, whether it be perspective they agree with or don't. It still is opening up those conversations, whether it be only in your own head or with others. But if you would like to get out of your own head and share it with us, we would love to hear it. So you can reach out to us through email, wrongthepodcast@gmail.com. And if you are watching on YouTube for the visual conversation, thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, leave comments, let us know. But also follow us on our social media at Wrong the Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. And if you are one of our listeners, please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We deeply appreciate it. And thank you so much for the people that have already done so. But other than that, yeah, I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We have some really exciting things coming up, always new discussions, new topics. And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.
All right. Bye.
Bye.